Hello, Garland Nixon here. It's Monday morning. We're talking with Laith Marouf. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're talking with Laith Marouf. And real quick, before we get going, don't forget, everybody, we're going to talk about this more. Free Palestine TV. All you have to do is go to Laith's great website, which is freepalestine.video, freepalestine.video for everything. And of course, there's the opportunity for you to be a part of it. Donate to Free Palestine TV. We'll talk about more about that later. Just wanted to do a quick intro. We're going to get going. Laith Marouf. All right. I'm not going to lead the witness. I'm going to ask you and get out of the way. You see what's going on, the so-called ceasefire, things of that nature. Let's get your thoughts on it.
Well, obviously, I was just watching a few minutes ago the speech of Netanyahu, the speech of Trump in front of the Zionist Congress, the Knesset. I had to turn it off, honestly, because it was like watching an insane person that is on a different plane of existence speaking. And but let's be very clear here. After 2 years of the combined might of the Zionist empire ruled from Washington, D.C., being directed at a extermination camp that is besieged for over a decade and a half, failed to defeat the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. And it was clear that if the Zionists wanted to continue this war in Gaza, it's going to take them another 2 years to capture Gaza City. So the ceasefire that we see right now and all this propaganda, manufactured theatrics of a Trumpian Netanyahu success is actually denying the reality. The reality is the Palestinians won this war. The colonized, to win a war, they only have to be not defeated, while the empires, the colonizers, when they are at war with the indigenous people, if they do not win a 100% win, they have lost the war. This is how these battles are counted. And because of course, the huge difference in firepower, the Palestinians, as we said, besieged in Gaza versus the whole combined might of the West. The other thing about this is that not only did the West lose the military battle on the ground, they've lost the propaganda war. In the propaganda war, defeat is resounding. There is no in this situation, there's no way that anyone can claim that the Zionists and the empire behind them won this propaganda war. In fact, this is probably the worst propaganda defeat that the Western Empire has suffered since the end of World War II. So what we saw right now is not only the Palestinians winning the hearts and minds of the vast majority of humanity and exposing the history of Zionism as a colonial project and its death cult, but we also saw the accumulated 80 years of propaganda that the West pumped against the world about international law, human rights, international organizations, women's rights, children's rights, environmentalism, all of that crushed at the rocks on the shore of Gaza. This is the most clear victory for any colonized people we've seen in 100 years. And so This is how we can measure what's happening right now. And I was also watching the live feeds of the Palestinian prisoners being released, almost 2,000 of them arriving in the West Bank and Gaza, and the joyous celebrations of seeing people that have been in jail for decades. Most of the lifetime serving Palestinian prisoners are going to be released today, and this is in spite of all the threats that the Zionist establishment has done, threatening all the families of the released if they show any joy, threatening any of the Palestinian prisoners being released that if they speak to the media. This is all of these people, the prisoners themselves, the families, the Palestinians in the West Bank, the Palestinians in Gaza are taking full risk to exhibit joy and to speak to the media about their story and their freedom right now.
I would say this: not only did they lose the propaganda war, a death blow was dealt to Zionism in America. A combination of, their evil deeds being rejected by people here, and the final death blow to me was the Charlie Kirk affair. It was the final death blow because people who had traditionally, we're all Israel, we support Israel now, can see it for what it is. And in the court of public opinion, particularly, amongst a lot of people who are on the right wing Israel supporters, in the court of public opinion, they have convicted the Israelis. And of course, which is really terrible for them in America, the billionaire Zionist supporters in the United States. People forget AIPAC is the American Israel political act. You know what I mean? American. These are people say, well, AIPAC is a FARA, it's foreign. Is it really? It's American. These are billionaire Zionists here, right? Who are pushing there. So a horrific death blow. You go online and all these conservatives that used to be, yes, Israel are now like, look at this video right here where they did this, and this. They killed Charlie Kirk right here. He was leaving Israel. A death blow in the United States. Far beyond a public relations loss. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, it's accumulated propaganda over 3 generations since the end of World War II, now gone. And so it's going to take the Zionists at least 2 generations to build up this cachet of propaganda in the collective mind, which is not going to happen. Things are moving too fast to do so. In fact, if we look at the propaganda strategy of the Zionists right now, is that they have abandoned the propaganda, period. And they are speaking in the open about whether their own control of the media and the social media spaces, like the purchase of CBS and TikTok and appointment of Very Unwise, people that call her Barry Wise, but her name should be Very Unwise, as the chief editor of the news in in this conglomerate, and or how they have decided that they will invest all their propaganda work in the extreme far right, whether it's religious in the Christian Zionists, with the announcement of creating this fencing, geofencing, and cyber fencing of churches in the United States to try to have a concentrated hundreds of millions of dollars spent on the churchgoers in the US to try to convince them to support the Zionist colony, and or they're giving a platform to the extreme far right, like the Tommy Robinsons of the UK or other places, in the open. And this is a desperate strategy. It shows you that they have lost the vast majority and they have no choice right now but to bring out the extreme tendencies within Western societies. And today, Netanyahu said one thing that shows you the intent of where they're going and why we're seeing this rise of fascism in across the West. He said that both Israel, as he called it, and the United States are promised lands. Okay, so here is Netanyahu reviving speech from the early colonialist era of the United States when the Anglo-Germanic settlers said that the United States or the land of North America is the promised land and that they are the chosen people. These were actual the language of how the original colonists in what is the United States and Canada spoke, and that they have the right to ethnically cleanse this land from its indigenous nations. So what is Netanyahu doing here, or with Trump deleting the Indigenous Day in the United States and reviving Christopher Columbus Day just recently, or calling Christopher Columbus an American hero? Damn, Christopher Columbus never set foot in what is the United States today. Okay, how is he even if you want to forget all his genocidal criminal activities, how is he an American hero? Just all of this is while it may seem to the Zionist as a winning strategy, what it will do in all of the Western countries that they're now desperately pumping this extreme fascism in is, all the friction points in these societies, all the schisms that are there in these societies are going to open badly. And it's going to be, the minorities, the indigenous people of the United States, who have been, for the most part, very peaceful in their resistance to the continued colonization of their land since the destruction of the American Indian movement AIM in the 1970s. They will be more violent in their resistance. The Black communities, the Latino communities that are in the United States, seeing that the extreme fascist representation in ICE on the streets, disappearing people in unmarked vans, will revive militancy within those communities. And so the Zionists are betting it's their last bet. They're betting on bringing extreme fascism into power in the West in order to stop the integration of Arabic and Muslim peoples and the democratic representation of the will of the peoples of those countries, where the majority of American citizens, Canadian citizens, others are against the genocide and against the colonialism that Israel is conducting. And therefore, this is a desperate last resort. And if the peoples of the United States and other countries rise up, even in a non-militarized way, rise up forcefully to push back the Zionists, this will be their last battle, and the Zionist colony will definitely end without direct support from the Western imperial powers.
And I would even say for the Western imperial powers, it's far worse than that, because to me, Zionist colony is doomed, done, finished. It can't survive without support from its masters here. But it has exposed something far worse in America, and that is that what is exposed is that the ruling elite don't represent the people. The illusion of democracy. You see, the people of America, for instance, the Democratic Party, as an example, pretty much 100% of people under 30 opposed Israel. 70-80% of Democrats were unhappy with what was going on, and the Democratic Party supported 100%. Republicans, more and more numbers were, very, very high. Again, younger people, forget it, they were unhappy with it. The Charlie Kirk thing, even the right wing is starting to say, oh no, this is bad news. But the ruling elite just says, we ain't listening to you. This is not what the worst thing that could happen to the ruling elite in the West, I'll go with the United States, is that it could be exposed that democracy is just an illusion. It's just a phantom. It's always been. And that the people who were faked out could suddenly say, well, we want this. And the ruling elite could just say, no, we're not doing it. And now they figure it out. Now, once they lose that illusion, they don't have anything else once the people start to know the truth. And I think that is the damage that can't be repaired.
Yeah, you're right. Look, this propaganda battle that the Palestinians won is so decisive, as you said, because it revealed all the internal power mechanisms within the Western societies to their own citizens. Anyone that was fooled enough to think that there is democracy or freedom of speech in the United States or the UK or so on has awakened, because the awakening was very rude, right?
Yeah.
They found out that if you say something, you could lose your job and go to jail. They found out that you're going to be beaten up in the streets of Berlin if you go out and demonstrate peacefully. So there's no return from this. This also why it's such an amazing achievement for the Palestinian peoples is that it elevated Palestine from being a foreign affairs issue where disgruntled Americans that don't like where their money is spent or how their government is conducting its international relations demonstrate about. Now it's an issue of internal rights of the citizens. An American citizen is losing his First Amendment. The British and European citizens are losing their freedoms. So the battle became an internal battle, and this is, I think, the first time we see such a liberation movement in faraway lands having such a direct impact on the day-to-day lives of people in the West. And now when we look at how the Zionists are getting more and more desperate in this situation, and you brought up Charlie Kirk multiple times right now. It's clear that in the ultra right in the United States, there is a faction that are trying to save America, okay, and are realizing that there is a way. America is a huge country, continent that controls really Canada. You have all these resources, you have the population, and so on. America can continue to be one of the most powerful nations on earth without the existence of the Zionist colony or imperial colonial expansionism. They are looking at China and they are looking at Russia and how they are, equal to the United States without having to be colonialist and imperialist, which is wasting the monies of the United States government on these projects and causing harm to the citizens and the standing of the United States. There's another faction, which is the Trumpian faction right now, which says, no, the United States must remain to be a colonial imperialist power. And the cornerstone of this imperialist strategy is having the Zionist colony keep all the Arabs and Muslims down and keep on beating them anytime we say so they can never rise. So this is also another achievement of the Palestinian liberation movement. It truly is that it awakened the conservative wing of the United States, which has traditionally been since the 80s the wing that supports Israel before it supports the United States, into awakening of there is a way for the United States to stay a superpower without having to support this genocidal colony that is destroying the image of the United States.
Two quick things I'll say. Number one, I think there was a discovery, and that is the um, a lot of people in America, you know, they thought like this: we are the wife and Israel's the mistress. You know, oh yeah, our government's going to look out for us. They've got a mistress over here, that's Israel, but we're the wife. And now they've come to the conclusion that Israel's the wife and they're the mistress. And they'll be cast aside and they'll be beaten, and their money and everything. The ruling elite sees the Israelis, sees the Zionist colony, the Zionist project as the foundation of their power. Well, you know, hey, there's this is the oil-rich region of the world, and we've got to have our intelligence headquarters there so we can go after Africa and China and everyone else. So they see that as this is the foundation. The American people became just an irritant. When the people in America said, hey, we don't like this, the ruling elite was like, you're getting on my nerves, shut up. Get out of the way. We got to take care of Israel right now. And I think that's one of the things that infuriates the American people, the recognition that they're second fiddle. And that's a fact. And that's the way the ruling elite see it. And now we have a ideological war, I would say, between the ruling elite, who still want to hold on to their wife and put the American people in second place, which is something the American people needed. The American people needed that. They were getting a little arrogant. And now they needed a wake-up call to find out where they really stood in this mix.
Look, this is maybe another thing that's important in this propaganda war, another part that the Palestinians clearly won. To be a Zionist, and if you're not Jewish, to be a Zionist and you're Christian, it means that you deny the original message of Christianity, that Judaism was a religion of God, and then the people of it got astray, and the holy word got distorted, and therefore God sent Jesus to guide people back to the right path. Similarly, to be a Zionist and to be a Muslim is to deny what your religion says is, again, Muhammad came as a prophet from the same God to redirect people the right path, and that there was distortions. And one of those main distortions that Christianity and Islam came to correct was this idea that there is a chosen people. The God that we worship as monotheists is a just, merciful God. And the message is that we come from one mother and one father, Adam and Eve, and we are all humans. And the only thing that we'll be judged on is how just we are with other humans. Don't steal, don't kill, don't covet your neighbor's stuff. So for Christian Zionists to exist, they have to be heretic to Christianity. For Muslim Zionists to exist, they have to be heretic to Islam. They have to, this Abraham Accord situation is about the Muslims saying our God was a liar and our prophet was a liar, and there's a chosen people and we submit to them. Arabic countries making a peace deal with the Zionist colony is to say that Arabic people, that's an admittance, that Arabic people are colonizers, and that these Polish and Ukrainian and Bulgarian colonists coming from Europe are the actual indigenous people. So it's a denial of self. For American people to say there's a chosen that are not them, it's saying Americans are less than. It's saying all of Europeans are less than. So this contradiction was glaring to us here on the ground since day one of the colonial project starting. So what do you mean, like you are a chosen people and coming in 1880 to take my land back, your land back? It now has set in the mind of Europeans and Americans to understand what Zionism means. Zionism means that you willingly, no matter what your race is, if you're or religion, if you're not Jewish, willingly say that you are less than. And if you don't accept that admitting that you are less than, then you will be taken down. And so now we have people in the United States, in the UK, whether they're religious or not, whether they're, have understood what Zionism means to them, which they have not awakened to in 100 years. And the resistance of Gaza is what awakened them to that reality now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me show you something. And I believe the combination of the Charlie Kirk debacle and this, I started seeing this on the news the last couple of weeks, right? Last straw. Most American Jews say Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza, right? The polls, not just war crimes, I think 40% of American Jews said they were committing genocide. The numbers, now, if you lost the American Jews, the rest of the people, it's going to, you know what I mean? Forget it. And the polls were becoming overwhelming. And here's what I thought. About the first of the year, they're going to start the primaries. I already know someone who's very anti-Zionist, who's challenging a Democrat in the primaries, right? They're going to get challenged like hell in the Democrat. Someone who's probably in their 20s, maybe 30, who's challenging them, right? They're going to get challenged by a lot of people. And I think they realize one thing. If this conflict was going on, they're going to get wiped out. Wiped out. Now, here's the next thing. The Republicans, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, who are right-wingers, I disagree with them on a lot of things, but are saying that this Israel stuff, not down with it, right? The Republicans, a lot of these right-wingers are going to be facing people in the primaries who are anti-Zionist. Not in the long distant future, within the next year, Zionism in Congress could be in deep and serious trouble. And I think they really had to come up with this whatever to stop the conflict. Now, a lot of people feel they're going to attack Iran for a number of reasons. They may. I don't see how they can do it. MAGA will collapse. They'll be furious. So at any rate, when you look at the polls, when you see the deterioration of support, I mean, that is an understatement to say the deterioration of support. Politically speaking, they're facing catastrophic consequences politically here in the United States.
Oh, yes. Those numbers in the polls of Jewish American population are, a great indicator of the tectonic shift that happened. And, if you know that at least just a little bit below half of the Jewish population in the world is in the United States, then this is very significant, of course, on a global scale for the Jewish communities. And the United States being the biggest supplier and donor to the Zionist colony and its Jewish communities being the biggest funders of these projects like the media control and others that we see, this is very significant. One thing that hasn't happened yet, and this is where the duty of Jewish anti-Zionists or critics of the activities of the Zionist colony should have, is to confront the control of Zionism of their Jewish institutions. The Palestinians and pro-Palestine movement at large can do a lot of things and change a lot of things in the country, like the United States or the UK. But as long as Jewish peoples and Jewish communities are used as a shield against any criticism of the foreign affairs policy of the United States, and or are used as a sword to accuse anyone who criticizes the activities of the Zionist colony as an anti-Jewish person, there will be a limit to how much change you can do. If any time somebody criticizes an American official about their position on the Zionist colony, they say that they are defending Jews, and the Jewish official organizations nod their head, then there will be a limit to the achievements. So Jewish anti-Zionists have a duty right now to rebel within their own community. It's enough. I'm done with hearing Jewish voices like Finkelstein and others yap and talk about the difference between Judaism and Zionism. It is time for them not to speak to the majority, but to speak to their own community. I want to hear people like Finkelstein call on Jewish community members to rebel in their synagogue against the rabbi that is preaching hate and supporting the killing of children in Gaza. There has to be a revolt within Jewish communities to liberate their Jewish institutions like the lobby groups and the World Jewish Congress and whatever it is, to liberate them from Zionism, to have the force of these institutions be directed towards peace, and not to allow these Jewish institutions to be the shield and the sword that is used to defend the imperialist objectives in our region of killing our peoples here, Arabic and Muslim peoples. So it is, if this doesn't happen, and this is where I think I want to be very clear about how critical this is. Because as we see the shift within the larger communities, the majority populations in Western societies is much more pronounced and drastic than the change that we just quoted in the Jewish American community. So let's say absolute majority of Americans, Canadians, British, Europeans are now against the Zionist colony. There are even absolute majority of people under 30 that are with Hamas openly. Okay, and if this shift continues to happen, while the Jewish institutions become the final obstacle in front of the liberation of Palestine and in front of the governments of those Western countries representing the will of their own people, okay, then the revolt against Jewish institutions controlled by Zionism will be an external revolt. And that's an ugly thing when, let's say, the majority in the United States say, God damn, those Jewish institutions are the ones that are getting our government to take away our rights. Then there will be something ugly that happens. This is why it is crucial that right now, anti-Zionist Jewish voices that are taking all this airspace to stop talking to us all and to talk to their own community, openly to their own community, and call for a revolt by their own members to make that change before the ugly other outcome becomes the reality.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I've been maybe voicing it a little different way, but for a while saying the same thing. And that is, you know, the Holocaust, so-called, the Holocaust, okay. It's so-called worst thing that ever happened in humanity, according to the propaganda we get. Terrible. I don't want to see 6 million people killed. You know, we're going to wipe these people out. It's terrible. I oppose that. A horrible, unthinkable thing. 27 million Russians died in World War II. 20 million Chinese died in World War II. Under the British occupation, an estimated 60 million, 10 times more Indians died. In fact, they starved 12 million deliberately at one time. But all we ever heard about was one particular Holocaust, which was a horrific. I'm opposed to those kinds of things happening. But it was, what we heard was that's the only thing that ever happened that was horrible, and all humanity must act to fix that horrible thing. which to an extent I agree with that. Anytime there's a Holocaust, but I'm like, well, there was 27 million Russians, 20 million Chinese. How about the Algerians? 6 to 9 million Algerians, a million Iraqis by the year. We could go on and on. 3.5 million Vietnamese, 900,000 Cambodians and Laotians. I could go on and on and on with the numbers that these imperial colonial powers slaughtered. But the only thing that was ever discussed was the Holocaust, which, might I add, was done by the colonial imperial powers. They were the ones that committed it, and then tried to convince us that they were the ones that had to make good on it by committing another one. So
Yeah, I
what
mean,
they've lost is that narrative that, oh my gosh, the Holocaust, we've got to make up for it. First of all, you committed it. You committed it. European colonial powers. The United States and the UK, I just had a show Friday where we had a historian that talked about the US and the UK building the Hitler machine. They created it. And they were always killing Jews for the last 1,000 years in Europe while they lived in peace amongst the Arabs. But this whole, sadly, the utilization of this to justify this colonialism in the Middle East is no more. That's what I think. That's what they lost also.
It's definitely gone, the Holocaust as a propaganda PowerPoint. It was always, obviously, as you mentioned, a propaganda point, not even only for Palestine. And you know, when we look at this historical record, it becomes clear that the only reason the quote-unquote Holocaust was given such prominence is because it was white-on-white violence. So, you know, and that somehow Jewish people were accepted into this whiteness after World War II, this fake whiteness, because they didn't even care about them when they were dying during the Holocaust or when they were dying in the camps after the end of World War II. And then they just suddenly all started crying for them and accepted them as part of this whiteness, the elite, in the 1950s. So it's the jig is out. The rest of the world is sick of it. And right now we have a true Holocaust that was broadcasted on all our social media for 2 years. And there's no way you can compare anymore or try to justify this current Holocaust of the Palestinian people because of the crimes 80 years ago. We're almost getting to a century, and they still want us to, all of humanity, to consider this genocide the only one that matters. And because we've had so many genocides, as you listed all of them, and then, by the way, an ongoing genocide in the Congo that nobody wants to talk about, or an ongoing genocide in the Sudan. These are all what I consider my people, and these are all suffering still because of colonialism and the machinations of imperialism. And Zionism is very, very, very invested in the Holocaust in Congo and the Holocaust in Sudan, extracting all their resources. You know, some of the biggest mining companies are controlled by these Zionists in the Congo. Definitely, the Holocaust is not something that they can twist people's arms with anymore. And it's another added example of the resounding thrashing of in the propaganda war that the Palestinians have conducted against the Zionists.
The other thing I think is it opened the eyes of the world, those who didn't know, that just how treacherous, you know, what is it, the perfidious all album or whatever they said about the British Empire, of their treachery, that the U.S. Empire is, and the British Empire are really one. They're the level of treachery. I think one of the things that's happening now that's interesting is what China's doing. and I've said they should do it for a while, for years. I mean, I'm an American, but I'm like, hey, Chinese should do this. That, I put it to you like this. If you said to me, hey, Garland, will you give me a ride to the store? Why? Because I got to buy a gun. What do you buy a gun for? Because I'm going to shoot you with it. I wouldn't give you a ride to the store. No. Well, after that, I need a ride over to Walmart. Why? Well, I got to buy some ammo. Why? To shoot you with it. Hey, okay, I'll tell you what. Fair enough. Give me a ride to the store so I can buy a gun. Why? So I can shoot your best friend over here in Russia. Why? Because after I shoot him, then I'm going to shoot you because he might help you. No. Not giving you a ride to the store to buy a weapon to shoot my best friend and then shoot me. And China said, yeah, we're not selling you anymore these what do they call rare earth minerals that you need to build weapons, because we're going to get them back in the form of missiles when you fire them at us. And I've been saying for a while, if I was China, I would not sell you the things that you need to shoot at me. And China said, it's recently, and if I was China, because the US was like, oh, well, we want to make a deal with you and let's go make a deal with China. If I was China, there's no way in hell I would ever make that deal. I wouldn't care what the US said. I wouldn't care if my economy had to suffer. I would simply say, I'd rather take a hit economically than sell you the means to attack me with. Makes sense, smart, good job, China. You're very wise, which also means we don't have the means to attack Iran or other people or start these damn wars all over the world or to rearm the Zionist colony because we can't build stuff. I think countries like China and these other countries have looked at the US doing this and said, you guys, this right out in the open, committing to genocide in this day and age, you're psychopaths. We got to deal with you differently. So I think it opened the eyes of some of the other groups too. And I'm very happy to see China wising up and finally doing the right thing. Even though it could hurt me, it's better for humanity. Well, it ain't going to hurt me because, hey, let's face it, I don't need missiles. In fact, I'd rather have that money spent on food for the American people than missiles for elsewhere. So good work, China.
Yeah, I mean, China spent the last 8 years trying to perfect the whole production cycle and own the whole production cycle of rare earths to make it that it can reach the ability to make such a choke point in retaliation for what Trump did in his first presidency with the semiconductors controls and the attacks on, of course, with the Obama years and the Biden years on Huawei and all the other high-tech Chinese companies. So China watched what the United States was doing and then plotted in ways that prepare it to be able to push its weight around, as we see here. And the blow is very harsh because these rare earth metals are crucial to building, as you mentioned, all the new guided missiles and the stealth plating and so forth on F-35s. And China now controls 90+% of the whole supply cycle, not only the raw product of these materials. And we saw yesterday beginnings of retaliations by the United States, where it ordered its vassal, the Netherlands, Holland, to take over one of the most, actually the only successful semiconductor producer in Europe, that is a Chinese company. And they came in, took out the CEO, appointed their own CEO, and confiscated the shares of the company. Basically, they nationalized this Chinese semiconductor producer in Netherlands, like things that are not allowed for people in Africa and Asia to nationalize their own, companies and or their natural resources. And this is going to lead to retaliations from China, of course. And whether it's this action of the Netherlands or the gathering, just to bring it back to Gaza and Palestine, or the gathering of all these leaders in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Sina, in Sinai Peninsula just now to sign on to the peace of Trump. Uh, all what the United States is doing is actually exposing more the vassalhood of these states that are supposed to be independent. So we see this: Holland is supposed to be independent. Suddenly, Holland doing something as a small, tiny country that is going to harm thousands of employees in Holland and its trade capabilities with China, and probably more, right? This is not an action of a sovereign state. This is an action of somebody being saying, hey, you do this now. The boss said so. And the same thing for this meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, where all these Arabic and Muslim and Western leaders, and the Prime Minister of Japan is flying into Sharm el-Sheikh. What does Japan have to do with a ceasefire in Gaza? The presidents of Azerbaijan and Armenia, what the hell do they have to do with Gaza? But the actual Palestinian resistance is not there. So what does this tell us? This tells us that Emperor Trump picked up the phone and said, hey, doggy, you come here right now. I need a show. I need you to jump through hoops in front of the camera and make me look good. And all these leaders from all supposed to be sovereign countries are rushing out of the blue to come to Sharm el-Sheikh. So whatever the United States does as an empire in its attempts to fight back those who are competing with it, like China, and or fight the axis of resistance and the Palestinian resistance itself, is only detrimental to its own powers and creating more schisms internally. That humiliation, what's going to happen to the economy of Holland because of what it did today, confiscating this company, is going to have huge internal impact on the livability of people in the Holland. What does their money can buy, how much their products, how far can they go? Because China also controls right now the biggest shipping companies, biggest shipping fleets. Things could get nasty for Holland, and it's, what does Holland sell anyways at this point other than beer and Siemens, turbines? What else? None of that is going to reach the world if China doesn't want it to reach the world. So we're just seeing the United States as an empire expose itself more because of its transigent, because of the Zionist forcing the elite in the West to take these positions that they are, just like the Zionists, better than everybody else. The United States can easily transform itself from an imperial power that its position depends on the enslavement and punishment of others to a world-class leader economy that can survive just like China without having to loot other people's resources easily because of the accumulated wealth that is there, because the United States still controls a lot of the media, because you can drive yourself that way. And it is the Zionists that are refusing to let the United States and European societies move that path. And more, this is going to cause these schisms to widen in these societies.
Yeah, I certainly agree with everything that you've said. The other thing about it is this: being you're in Lebanon, I don't have to tell you, Lebanon, Syria, the history of France and the Middle East, the history of French colonialism, the blow that's been struck to French colonialism in the Sahel region, etc. The other thing that's happening is this: the super pro-Zionist governments in the UK, in France, in Germany are hanging on by a thread. the colonial powers, in particular, France is hanging on by a thread. Macron's in deep and serious trouble. Normally, he'd be in Lebanon right now, talking about all the things he's going to do and how he's going to, straighten out the Middle East. He is hanging on by a thread. I believe that, a combination, of course, of what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Gaza, that either one of them would be devastating to politics in Europe, but combined, they're catastrophic. And now what happens when these governments start to fall and you get more nationalist powers in, shall we say?
Yeah, look, in France, it's a totally different story than the rest of Europe, because the left coalition won a majority, an absolute majority in the parliament, and President Macron has been not allowing them to form a government, appoint a prime minister. So we saw, I think it's now 6 prime ministers resign or be fired in 6 months, okay, since the elections in France. And that is because Macron is breaching the constitution of France, acting as a dictator, emperor, mini Napoleon, and appointing by force prime ministers and cabinets. And so there is a total political crisis in France. And I think the left is the strongest in France in comparison to other European states or the UK. In the UK, the story is a little bit the opposite. The Labour Party and the Conservative Party are both extreme Zionists. And the Labour Party is really a conservative party right now. And the establishment, the left in the UK, has always been weak in comparison to the left in France. Okay. And the left is in crisis, where Corbyn left the Labour Party, but he doesn't want to join Galloway. And also you have the Greens. And also there's an internal fight between Corbyn and the other member that left the Labour Party with him, that formed this new party. So it's chaos. There is no real alternative on a left base. So the Zionists are more successful in the UK in the sense that they are putting the Reform Party with Farage and the extreme racist Nazi-like right as the only alternative to Labour or Conservatives. And it seems like the Reform Party will take power of the UK, and it will be the first time any other party other than the Labour and Conservatives ruled since the end of World War II. And this is going to be a total Nazi party. And this is the situation in the UK is more dangerous in that sense. In France, there's a possibility of a peaceful resolution of the problem between the state and the citizens, that there is possible a left to take control. If Macron falls as a president, there could be an out for the internal pressures building inside France. But in the UK, it doesn't seem like there's a pressure valve that could be opened to release the accumulating pressure within the UK, especially if a reform government takes control and we're in full fascism mode in the UK.
Yeah, and I think the reform government is just another puppet of the, they'll be like Maloney in Italy, where they're like, oh, we're standing against this. As soon as they get in, they will do exactly what they're told by the British Crown. A question. One of the things that, recently there's been great questions about is the death of these Qatari diplomats. And what's interesting is it was a car crash. Okay. And normally there's a car crash. People say there was a car crash. People are so suspicious now. Everything that happens, if some guy slips and breaks his ankle, everybody looks at the Zionists. I think they killed it. You know what I mean? That's where they are here now. Anything that I've said, if Trump, who, just eats like burgers and fries and sodas every day. I mean, I'm surprised he's still alive, living off of McDonald's food, but whatever. But let's just say tomorrow, Donald Trump dropped dead, had a heart attack, a stroke, or something. There's a lot of people, Americans, that would say the Zionists killed him for doing this in Israel. Anything that happens. So the Zionists now, especially after Charlie Kirk, anything that happens, they stand accused, right? The Zionists, the Qatari diplomats, is there any discussion about that in the region?
You know, put yourself in the head of these Zionists and think about how, many decades they spent to stop people from thinking that Jews control everything. Jews control money, Jews control media, so on. And today it's normalized. If an earthquake happens, people are like, Israel's behind it.
Yeah.
So, even if they're not going to say the Jews are behind it, they're going to say Israel's behind it. So it's a total loss. There's no way there's no way they can win the crowd anymore. Now, looking at this quote unquote accident in the Sinai Peninsula, it just doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, the location where all these presidents are meeting, people are being flown in. So this is going to be a short ride from the airport to the hotel. What accident? The whole area of Sharm el-Sheikh has been under lockdown. There's no, indigenous Egyptians that are even moving in the streets. Okay, it's a resort. There's no, people driving on the roads going back and forth to a grocery run or something like that. What kind of accident can? And the roads in the area around Sharm el-Sheikh are top notch, made for international tourism. So it doesn't make any sense that this was an accident. Now, I know there is the conspiracy theory that the Israelis killed these negotiators because of supposedly helping Hamas. But truthfully, the negotiation team of Qatar, their only job is to undermine the position of Hamas, to put pressure in the room on Hamas to accept, the demands of the Zionists. That was their whole job all the time. The Qatari, the Egyptian, and the Turkish negotiators. That's their whole job, to twist the arms of Hamas negotiators to accept what the Zionists want. So why would the Zionists want to kill them? There's pictures of these negotiators, bear hugging the Zionist masters. Why would they want to be killing them? So if there is a conspiracy to actually kill these negotiators, it would be the resistance that did it. To punish them for the services that they did to the Zionists. This is in my mind, and it would be a glorious, actually, operation taking out these Qatari negotiators. And I hope, if the axis of resistance is behind this and their special forces, that they're able to also kill everybody that is going to this Sharm el-Sheikh conference, and end the suffering of the whole region with the gathering of all the vassals in one place. A few missiles could, set us forward in the region for 100 years in one leap, if the elite of the vassal regimes in the region are killed.
One of the things I think that is interesting is the discussion about the resistance. They've been weakened, they've been wiped out. We heard after Pagergate, after the pagers, they've been wiped out. One of the things that happened after that is everybody's like, oh no, the Israelis control our electronics, they control our phone. Like you said, now everybody thinks the Israelis controls everything. Whether they do or not is irrelevant. There's a belief that they're got their hands in everything. And I don't think the resistance is weaker. If you look at what Yemen did, Yemen fired. Yemen said, all right, we'll stop shooting at them now. But if they start up, we're going to start shooting again, right? The resistance, both in their support around the world and their technology, in their tactics, All of the above have become much more powerful. Iran finally demonstrated, the Israelis, a lot of people like Israel's going to attack Iran. I mean, and I'm like, well, the last time they attacked, they had like a 12-hour jump start before Iran could defend itself, and they still got pummeled to pieces in 12 days. I don't see how they can do it. They've been exposed as militarily weak. And I think the resistance in a number of ways is much stronger, has much better support, is much better understood around the world. I think the resistance is stronger. And look at Iran. They demonstrated, everyone's like, hey, we're going to take on Iran. You don't want to take on Iran. They beat you easily. It wasn't even a fair fight between Israel and Iran.
Yeah. Similar to the loss of propaganda that the Zionists suffered on a global scale, they suffered it locally and regionally here. So a lot of the propaganda, for instance, that was put on the Lebanese population to make them hate Hezbollah has now been diffused. The vast majority of Lebanese, no matter what their religious background or their political background is, are saying we are against Hezbollah giving up its arms, and they are the defendants of our nation. And look at those fascist, death squads in Syria and inside the Zionist colony. What are they doing to the populations there? The propaganda pileup about, anti-Shia that the Wahhabi kingdoms in the Gulf, pumped in the Muslim Sunni population over the last 3-4 decades have also been destroyed because the Sunni populations watched as only the Shia resistance came to the aid of the Palestinians. Hamas, Hezbollah, Ansarullah, Yemen, Iraq, Iran sacrificed their leadership and their best warriors and used all their weapons to defend Palestine. And yesterday there was a gathering here in Beirut, part of the a week of commemorations for the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, was a gathering for the scouts, the youth scouts. And there was 100,000 youth scouts in the Olympic Stadium here in Beirut, gathered under the banner of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the martyr of the nation, and saying, we are going to carry forward your way and your message. And this has now become the largest, by the way, gathering of scouts in the world. So Guinness Book of Record kind of situation. So that shows you how this is also happening in Iran. There was a huge part of this population that was propagandized about women's rights and democracy and so on, and then they saw what the Zionists and the Americans have in for their country, and they're now all aligned behind the government and the military of Iran, to the point where the Iranian establishment feels safe enough to lift the ban on the hijab. Okay, the ban on not wearing a hijab. This shows you how confident the state is that the major pressure point that the West was using prior to the genocide in Gaza, that was destabilizing the country, and the elite were scared, the government was scared of lifting this ban because so it doesn't look like it's a success for the West. Now we're felt comfortable enough to remove it with not one fuss inside Iran or on a global scale, right? So the resistance today, while it gave a lot of sacrifices, is much stronger ideologically. It's within its own communities, direct, immediate communities, within its neighborhood, within the global scale. Everybody's behind it. And the technologies of Iran that are independent of China and Russia, that can withstand, if their supply lines are cut, let's say, between China and Russia and Iran, and Yemen, a besieged country, can do these things, and Hezbollah here in Lebanon can do these things. That is a clear indication that the resistance axis is stronger at a lot of losses and a huge cost, but it's stronger today because much of the weight that was on top of it has been removed, this weight of decades of propaganda. And it is much more nimble now with a newer generation that is harder for the West to pin down and can be creative. And I expect creativity to be flowing out of the axis of resistance in the next battles that we will see.
Yeah, and lastly, I'll say this: the most, this the to me the biggest thing that happened here, outside of course Yemen, is that the Iranians have come together around a common cause, around their government, but I'd say around a common cause. You know, they were able to divide the Iranian people. They were able to insert all kind of operatives and spies. And I was reading and talking to different people from Iran, and they were saying, you know, that like every Iranian's looking all the time. If they see something suspicious, they report it. If they think that there's spies, if they think that there's somebody's making drones or whatever, that now it's not just, you know, externally, but the Iranian people feel that they have to be a part of the resistance for their government, that they have to support their government. They have to defend their culture, their history against not just the Zionists, but against the West. So you've brought together, the plan for Iran was to divide it internally. That's how they were going to take Iran. And Iran has come together since that attack so strong that any hope of what they were going to do to take Iran to pieces, it's over. That's done.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, this is why we see the Americans and the Zionists returning to the idea of having regional attacks on Iran, whether it's trying to get Afghanistan to give up Bagram Airport and or the Pakistanis to align with the Saudis and so forth. All of it shows you that the plot to have internally destabilized Iran is not working. Therefore, they are back to their external pressure points.
All right. Lastly, and most importantly, we now want to check out freepalestine.video, right? That is, oops, there we go. This is what you need to see. That's Laith's great site. It's freepalestine.video. You can check that out, Free Palestine TV. And of course, you know, they've got latest episodes. They've got field reports, military operations, of course. And most importantly, you can donate right here. Oh, see that donate? You can choose your amount, or you can do a custom amount, or you can do it one time, but it would be great if you can do this monthly to help Free Palestine TV. So that's freepalestine.video. That is the website. As you can see, it's an outstanding website with all kinds of great info and stuff there. Laith Marouf, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate it. Everybody, we're all going to get together. We're going to, I think those of you who helped, who posted freepalestine.video on your websites, on your all of your social media accounts, you all helped what had to be done in the Middle East, and we can continue to help Laith with his good work. Thank you very much, Laith, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
See you soon, Garland. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks everybody. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.